So yeah, I'm Nikesh. I'm an author and a screenwriter, and my first comic was incredibly a Spider-Man comic. I was very lucky to work on the comic for Spider-Man India a couple of years ago for Marvel, and it went so well. They asked me to write a short story for the Amazing Spider-Man issue 50, which was like the honor of my life. Um, but I know Camille from my co-working space at the Watershed in the Pervasive Media Studio, and Camille will introduce herself, and then we'll talk a little bit about how we kind of came together.
Thank you, Nikesh. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Camille Aubry, and I'm a French illustrator based in Bristol. So I work as an illustrator for publications, books, toolkits, exhibitions, campaigns, and I also work as a live illustrator during cultural and community and academic events. So you might have heard the word scribe or sketchnoting. That's also what I do. And I create comics. And yeah, Nikesh mentioned the Watershed. Watershed is an amazing space in Bristol. It's a cinema, but it's so much more than that. It's a restaurant, a cafe, it's a community space, it's an exhibition space, an event space, and they have a studio, and this is where we met. So.
Yeah, so Camille and I became fast friends because I think we both were wrestling with the same question, which is I think we bonded first as parents. Like, how do we as parents who are politically minded and our work is very politically minded, how do we raise our children in these times? Am I allowed to swear? Are we allowed to swear in this? How do we raise our children in these fucked up times? And it's a question that's sort of really been troubling us both for ages. And so we would just sit in the studio for hours and hours and hours, just talking about how sad and despondent we felt about what was happening in the news. And so my work is very politically minded. I write a lot about race and immigration issues. I have a column for a radical newspaper in Bristol called the Bristol Cable, and Camille's work is also incredibly politically minded as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, just in a nutshell, so the themes I work with and I'm interested in are like social and climate justice, but also care and accessibility. So I work for a lot of various campaigns and research that, try to explore this a little bit more. And I guess, yeah, meeting Nikesh I don't know how many years ago now, as as part of the resident teams of Watershed. I always felt like we would do something together, like we would do a project, but we didn't know what. But it was okay because we know it will happen and it would be great. That kind of like relationship like felt great. And yeah, I think it was about a few months ago. Nikesh sent me a text and. I'm trying to move my slides. Sorry, I'm just not being very efficient with
Yeah, so
with the screen
this
share.
this year for me was very much like the year of do it DIY. I came up through the DIY scene, and there's something about working within the various publishing and TV sort of institutions that made me yearn for doing quick and dirty fun stuff that you have the idea, you execute the idea, you can release the idea out to the public as quickly as possible. And so I texted Cami because I'd had an idea, and I thought that she'd be the perfect person to collaborate with on it. So I've been thinking a lot about anger, and you because I think when we think about how the world is, like my base emotion is just anger, fury at the way the world is, and I never know where to put that anger. And I also think that anger, especially in the West, especially in England, is treated as a negative emotion because of how it kind of manifests outwardly. And actually, anger can be a fire for inspiration. It can instigate you to take action. And over the last couple of years in Bristol, that we've just been inundated with far right protests, and that have sprawled out into violence, and it's been really hairy raising our kids. And last year, towards the end of last year, there was a big far right demonstration in London where 100,000 far right people marched through London, and then in the weeks after that, there was a spate of racist attacks in Bristol, and a mile away from where I'm sitting right now, a young girl, a 9-year-old girl, was shot in the face during a racially motivated attack. Sorry, we should have trigger warning this, so we're going to be talking about racism and violence and anger. I should have said that at the start. I'm really sorry. But we, and I didn't know what to do with any of that stuff, and so I was talking to Cami about it, and we came up with the idea of a new kind of superhero, that was basically a cipher for me because I kept sort of threatening to sort of just burn it all to the ground and join Antifa and take to the streets and speak to the street motto, chat shit, get banged. And so I sort of pitched to Cami a superhero origin story. Like, what if a middle-aged dad, a dad of two who has a very respectable career as a novelist, has an existential crisis and decides he wants to join Antifa. And Cami was like, okay, cool, but like, what's the point of someone like someone like that? And we had this really interesting debate about how one talks about anger and masculinity and how men can't really deal with their emotions, and that ultimately became the sort of the North Star for what we wanted to create. So we've created a thing called Mad Villain. It's a comic book about a writer who doesn't look a million miles d different from me, who joins Antifa when he spots racist graffiti on his walk to school with his kids, which is not entirely untrue thing that happened to me at some point last year. Cami, do you wanna talk a little bit about what happened when I texted you?
Yeah, so I don't know. I think I received like a WhatsApp from Nikesh like weird time in the evening, and when you receive this WhatsApp message and you can see like read more, and usually when you text they are like quite short, so I was like, oh shit, what happened? And then it's like actually the synopsis. And then say like another message followed saying, "Do you want to work on this?" And I was just questioning like, is he drunk or is he like? And then I read I read the synopsis and I was like, "Oh yeah, 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 I want to watch this definitely." And then you said, "Did you see that movie,
One battle after
Leonardo
another.
DiCaprio, One Battle
Yeah.
After Another?" And I was like, "Yeah." And you were saying, well, this is what I want to do, but as a comic. And I was like, yeah, I've seen it. And we completely like bonded over this. And yeah, it was kind of obvious that it was already going in the right direction. But yeah, so on this page, you can see like a massive Canva brain fart. And it's literally what my brain looks like. So in the middle, in that yellow kind of rectangle, is Nikesh original WhatsApp message with a synopsis, and then I sent him back a Canva link, and he was like, "What happened to my synopsis?" And I was like, "This is what my brain thinks like. I just put things into images, starting making mood boards and imagery, and then like on the far, like on the right side, on the down, like you can see me starting drawing characters and doing thumbnailing and things. But there was like from the beginning a sense of urgency from the point where we decided to work on this. It's like, right, we need to put it out there. It was almost as if like we didn't even try like to get this. Let's do try to find a publisher or anything. And it was like, no, let's do it and put it out there. We didn't want to be like managed or like directed by anyone else than or what was in our guts basically at that point. And yeah, so how we work together. So we have this Canva thing, which Nikesh is scared of. And we have like video calls, which is why you see that weird photo of me in my pajamas and Nikesh with his laundry in the back. And and then I was like anticipating that people would ask us, how do you work together? Like, how did you make the characters? And Nikesh had this amazing thing, which I wrongly called his baby making machine. And he was like, what? What are you talking about? And he was like, no, when you do a character, and he was like, to explain the character is like, imagine so and so had a baby, and that's your character. And I was like, oh yeah, this is great. So there is a few screenshots of that. So imagine Trump's press secretary and Meghan McCain. had a baby together. And then we see Lumber, a racist. Imagine Barry from EastEnders had babies with James Gandolfini. I mean, this is the best brief ever as an illustrator. But yeah,
I only realised recently what a hunk James Gandolfini is seen as, which I find bizarre, given that the character he's most famous for is so so horrific. Um, but what we really lent into was like, I, what one of the reasons I really wanted to work with Cami was I really love her style and how playful it is and how full of life it is and how nuanced it is, and you know there's so much detail in everything she does, and yet it kind of has this really lovely kinesthetic like cartoon style that I think is really great. It doesn't it like it looks sort of um purposefully sort of larger than life, and I kept saying to her, I think we should make this a superhero origin story, because I think the thing that people are most crying out for at the moment is, what do I do? What do I do in these situations? What am I willing to do? What am I willing to give up? And these are questions that we are all asking ourselves, and the questions that we all should be asking ourselves. Like in this time of collapse, in these times of the rise of the far right, in these times of genocide around the world, like what are we willing to give up and what do we do? And we wanted to show that ordinary people can be superheroes too. And you know, like this person, sure, he's a writer, but that doesn't give him any special powers. Or the only power he really has is he decides that he is going to um take a stand for what he believes in. And not only that, is he's going to bring his partner along with him. And one of the things when I was pitching this to my wife, who's a historian, a thing that my wife says quite often is, you know, think of the women who made the family life easy for all of these civil rights heroes that exist in our lives, all these men. And so what we've really lent into is like the family dynamic being really important to this character. And that was really a really important dialogue for me and Cami to have, because we didn't want it to feel too masculine, because ultimately superhero origin stories tend to err towards the masculine, but we wanted to make a comment about masculinity. And here is a person who has decided that he just wants to punch a Nazi in the face. But what we want him to understand is that won't change the world. And so what do you do next? And so, but sometimes the jumping on point can be, I want to punch a Nazi in the face, which I learned quite recently is a controversial stance to take. I thought we were all agreed that Nazis were the bad guys, right? I don't know if anyone disagrees with me on the Zoom. Hopefully not. But I found out recently that apparently it's not okay to just say wantonly, I think it's okay to punch Nazis. But there you go. Therein lies the comment on violence and masculinity that we wanted to make.
we had a massive, like, I don't know, a long discussion, let's say, during the launch of the book with someone who was offended because we presented the comic as, you know, someone who wants to punch a Nazi in the face. And the guy was like, I'm so offended, like, by, you know, like, why do you promote violence? And I was like, why aren't you offended by the word Nazi? Why are we still having to deal with Nazis nowadays, you know? And this is a contemporary story. It's like, I don't know. Yeah, yawn.
So yeah, we're just coming up to time. So what basically, so just to kind of round up, like this is a 5 issue collaboration between me and Cami. We're working on issue 2 at the moment, and what we wanted the first one to kind of be the birth of a superhero, and then undercut him with every single issue. So issue 2 is very much about his initiation into this sort of like version of Antifa that uh we've invented. We'd, you know, obviously we'd love for people to support the comic book. We've only made it available as a physical copy because I think that was like my steer more than Cammy's. Like I just as an like I love physical things, and I really wanted it to feel like it existed out there rather than something that could just be disposably made available online for people to kind of skim through. I'm going to put a link to the store where you can buy the first issue, and I've put a special offer code in there that will make sense if you live in the UK. But if you don't live in the UK, you might go, "What's up with this offer code?" But yeah, we, you know, I love for you guys to support it so we can keep making these comics, because we're both. I'm enjoying this process so much. I love working with Cami. I always love working with collaborators who ask difficult questions and don't just sort of go, yeah, sure, and then try and be amenable to the thing that you're suggesting. And actually, the way Cami has challenged me to be a better writer in this is like much better than any editor could have given us, which is what really for me justifies doing this independently.
Nikesh, right back at you. Such an amazing process. It's like I was saying to him earlier today, it's my happy place at the moment, is doing Mad Villian. There you go.
I'm going to be talking about my process more than about the message of my stories. And what I've noticed is that the process that I use to draw the comics, I'm a solo creator. I do all of the steps myself. It's really influenced by the type of stories that I want to tell. You can see my slides, right? People can see my slides. Yeah. Cool, thank you. So my work spans quite a few genres, but it usually deals with very difficult themes like allegory. I've I've used suicide as a theme a few times. I use uncomfortable sexual scenarios, all sorts of like dark, difficult themes. That's what I love to write about. My first graphic novel is called 14 Nights, and it was a realistic dark romance about a man who is afraid of sex. And then I have another series called Yasha Lizard, which is a comedy series about these Victorian animals, anthropomorphic animals, who have a class-based society where the mammals are the aristocracy and the reptiles are the underclass. So although they're different art styles, different genres, I really like those difficult themes, nuanced characters. And I've also done a lot of short comics. And last thing that I want to say about myself is that I won some Arts Council funding this year, and I'm bragging about that to everybody. So, what kind of story that I want to tell? First of all, I really want to tell long stories. I have written many short comics, but I see myself as a long story person, like a novelist in comic form, to coin a phrase. I like philosophical stories and I like nuanced characters and imaginative worlds. I know that in my lifetime, I need to draw thousands of pages of comics or I won't die happy. So I need to be very strategic about it. So I try to get a balance between flexibility and mechanistic processes. I have these kind of goals going in to my creation process, starting from the kind of most zoomed in, smallest level characters. I want characters to be visually engaging in design, movement, expression, color. They need to have a design that lets their faces like show their emotions. The setting, a lot of my settings are imaginatives. They don't exist in real life. So I try to design them to be visually distinct from one another and to set it up so that I'll be able to use good camera angles and I won't kind of put myself in a box in terms of cinematography. Each page should feel like a complete whole with a distinct rhythm to it. Every chapter should have a beginning, middle, and end. Each chapter should have a coherent theme, and the overall story should have room to develop as I come up with new ideas. As we know, comics take a long time. So if you start an idea 5 years ago, it might change a bit in the present, especially as you get, your personality develops. So that's the sort of like flexibility that I feel I have to have. Alethia is my main project. Those other comics, I really love those a lot, but Alethia is where my heart is right now, has been for a while. I remember Moy saying that I should read read the text. So I will be trying to read the text just for accessibility. So bear with me while I read my slide. Long ago, a people known only as the creators invented sentient robots whom they entrusted with the production of everything necessary to maintain society: energy, silicon, oil, and entertainment. One day, without warning, the creators abandoned their world. Robots continue to work, but for a sense of confusion weighs on them. June, an amnesiac robot, travels through ethereal factories in search of perfect efficiency. So this is my long-running science fiction comic. It hit 700 pages this year. I began it in 2015. I took a short break for about 4 years, and I started it up again this year. So I'd say I've been working on it for about 7 years total. And this comic has really helped me to develop this process that is a blend of efficiency and flexibility. My process looks a little bit different, I think, than if you have separate roles for the writer, the inker, the colorist, the penciler. All of those things are me. But when you blend them, it's not that I'm just passing the role, like first I'm the scriptwriter and then I am the penciler. It's because I'm the same person, the process really changes from something that you would find in, for example, the superhero assembly line style to something quite different. And I think many of you who are familiar with that will like already spot some things that I just don't do. One of the things that is really important to me, comics are a visual medium, so I can't just write a script in prose. I have to be drawing and writing at the same time. And those processes, they feed back into one another. Don't worry, there's going to be pictures. There will be pictures later. But so the first 4 steps: brainstorming, prose, scene concepts, and staging, roughs. Those are very flexible. And then you get to pencil, ink, color, pre-press, and those are the very mechanistic parts of the process. Brainstorming is where it all begins. I try out different character concepts, different settings. I often create a template for the characters in a certain story so that I only need to redesign the eyes or the, I don't know, decorative elements to tell one character from another. I'll just often draw something. Sometimes I even will draw with my eyes closed and then open my eyes and see what kind of shape was on the page and then try to like make a character out of it. This is very free form. You can do anything at this stage. And what I've noticed is that I create this big bank of character concepts and brainstorming, and I often return to it sometimes years later. On the screen, you'll see a sketch from 2014 with these yellow-clad robots with black skin that I drew ages ago. And then I used that character for a story in 2016, and then she became one of the main characters in the series, actually. But I didn't have any idea about that when I was first sketching. And the oldest sketch that I can remember returning to is over 10 years old. So it pays to keep your old sketches. The prose part of the process, I will loosely write a prose version of a story, and I'm trying to get all the main story beats, character personalities, the main conflicts, desires, themes, and the message all worked out. I don't consider the staging or the layout at all at this stage, and I'm just trying to make sure I understand the characters very well. As I said, exploring like difficult themes and nuanced characters are one of the main goals of my stories. So I'm going to run you through, for the rest of this, I'll run you through an example of a scene from Alethia chapter 8. In this scene, a character named Simone interrupts a presentation given by another character, and she mocks the crowd and baits them into an argument with her. And it's later revealed that she does this in order to save face for a third character. I'll read it out loud. Suddenly, a voice from the back of the room breaks the silence. What is to be done indeed, citizens? So much for the sublime and the beautiful. From the shadows, a figure emerges. Someone in the audience groans. I see you're all speechless before our master writer, foiled again, our carefully cultivated arts, revealed to be as hollow as the tower we all reside in. She gestures dramatically and sarcastically. Oh, how shall we reconstruct the lie that lets us go on living? Fuck off, Simone. Nobody wants to hear your inane ramblings. So we'll explore that scene. One last thing before we get into that scene. Sometimes I actually will build like a paper model of the setting because they're not realistic settings, they don't exist, and I don't have any reference for them. And it can be quite hard to visualize them. So I'll actually build like a really quick papercraft model, snap a few photos, and then just kind of look at it. But yeah, staging. Staging is really important, especially when you have a lot of characters in the scene at once. So I always have a section of the comic process dedicated to figuring out how the characters are going to move through the space. Sometimes I'll actually I always draw a top-down kind of architectural rough sketch of the area. Sometimes I'll even draw a little arrow for how characters are supposed to move. Unfortunately, I didn't save most of these because they were just for me, but that's an example that you see there of the scene coming up. It is really important to keep track of like what's going to be on the left, what's going to be on the right, because the last thing you want is for the reader to be confused because then they pulled out of the story. The roughs are the absolute most important stage for me. That's an iterative stage. I go back and I redo them quite a few times. This is when I work out the flow, the cinematography. I trim down the dialogue to about 30% of what I wrote in the prose. The facial expressions and the body language, I really explore those. I try to draw as loose as possible because I might want to draw the same facial expression like 3 or 4 times before I really decide what it's going to look like. It's really important that before I get to this stage, I have a really clear picture of what the characters look like and what the setting looks like and how everybody's arranged in the space so that I can then focus on the camera angles and the page composition. As you can see with these examples, I actually cut and paste and rearranged some of the pages until the panels that I'd drawn in the roughs. For example, you can see that I used 2 panels from the middle in the first rough as the last 2 panels in the third rough. So I do that sort of thing a lot. Not only do I consider the whole page, but I'll rough out the whole scene and read it over and over again to make sure that the flow, like beat for beat, is like very perfect and feels completely seamless. What I usually do for the whole rough stage is I'll create 40 or 50, however many pages I think the chapter is going to be, and it's always more than I think it will be. I'll create about 40 or 50 pages that are blank, and then I'll just start going through, like doing the roughs one by one, then go read it through, see how it flows, how it reads, and then just start redrawing again, anytime, anywhere in the scene. I conceptualize each chapter as a whole, make sure it fits together as a whole and feels really strong as a single unit. I think that probably a lot of my fellow comic artists right now are thinking, well, where's the thumbnail stage? There's no thumbnail stage. I don't do the thumbnail stage. For me, the roughs are the main stage. They are like the thumbnail stage because thumbnails, for those who haven't drawn a comic before or aren't familiar with the term, thumbnails are these very tiny drawings that people do to plan out a comic. And the idea is that they're very loose, they're very rough, similar to the way I do roughs, but they're very small. And that's why I don't do thumbnails, because they're too small. And I really want to explore the facial expressions and get really loose with them so that I can explore a few different facial expressions. And lastly, on the bottom of this slide, it says that I wanted Simone to lean against a pillar. And I really wanted that story beat where she's leaning against the pillar and then the camera zooms back and you see her between these two other characters. So this is what those rough sketches look like now that they're finished. I'll go back so you can kind of see back and forth a bit. That ends the flexibility stage. And then from here on out, it's very mechanistic. Just do the pencil, do the ink, do the color. I chose this coloring style in advance because it was actually more fast, quicker than doing a black and white comic. I really wanted to make sure that my coloring was very quick. I didn't want to, as I said, I want to do a lot of comics in my life, and I don't want to be bogged down by trying to choose the colors on every single page every single time. So to recap, this method, go all the way back, something I developed over many, many years, a lot of trial and error, but this works really well for me. And I hope that maybe people have got some ideas for how they could kind of take some of these ideas into their own process. And I hope it would make it a little bit faster or a little bit more easy to edit. As the creator, you don't want to commit to pencil ink color right away because then it's so hard to go back into the comic and change things, especially when you get to the end and you realize, oh, I could have foreshadowed that. Yeah, that's why I do these roughs all the way through, because then when you decide, oh, I could put this in, it could be foreshadowing, you actually have the freedom to do that. And I feel in the end, for me, it makes the story stronger. And that's what it's all about. My comics are all available to be read for free on my website, kstipetic.com. Please read them. And if you insist on buying a physical copy of a comic because you're just stuck in the 20th century, you can give me money for the comics if you insist. There's also a QR code. Thank you.
This slide is actually gently recycled from a visit I did at a university. I was talking to illustrators, so I was like, "Oh, I'm an illustrator," and now we're talking to cartoonists, so I'm a cartoonist. But there's always an opportunity to work with words and pictures, and you could just call yourself an artist. I give you permission. And I was trying to figure out how to make this talk concise for 15-ish minutes, and then also see if there was some type of theme, something that was at top of mind. And for whatever reason, I started thinking about the mascot for the Philadelphia Flyers hockey team. His name is Gritty. I felt bad because Moy just took a drink of something, and I hope that I didn't scare her with this Muppet. So this is like a man in a costume. He's a mascot. His name is Gritty, and he has these eyes that sort of like toggle around, and he looks a little unhinged. And this became a meme, and it was something that was sort of adopted fondly by left-leaning ideologies online in good humor. I don't know, maybe about like 10 years ago. But I like this idea of becoming ungovernable, like just being a just an outside force, not necessarily for just good or bad or chaos, just something a little outside of the line. So I was trying to think of advice I could give, and I was like, what about being unmarketable? Could we could we explore that? And maybe that comes from not myself. I've made a maybe you could say a career in the arts, but art doesn't really pay handsomely, and so you kind of have to make your way one way or another anyway. But I was trying to look back through the catalog of work that I wanted to talk about and see if there's any guiding light. And I thought it might be to focus on the thing that you love to do and make that, and then maybe hopefully commerce will gently follow. And So I was looking also through, I was trying to see how far back I wanted to go about the things that seem to continue in the work that I'm making now. And these were little tiny paintings I did probably over 10 years ago. They're like 4 by 6. It's gouache, which is like watercolor. It has more opacity to it. It has more pigment and chalk in it. And I'd been living in New York City and my painting was getting smaller and smaller. I went to art school. I got a scholarship. Shout out to the cost of higher ed is crazy. So I was able to go, but I graduated art school in 2008, and I wasn't really sure what to do with myself in terms of making a career as a successful illustrator. So I would just come to the studio and do these paintings of men that I was friends with. I was on Facebook at the time, and I thought they were kind of cute, and I really loved them. It's hard to see, but this green one is my friend Josh Baer, who's holding a cat. So a lot of these were interested in masculinity, but like the vulnerability of like men, broadly speaking. It was also just a straight up excuse to to be like, oh, he's cute. I want to make a every artist needs a muse. So I thought this it was a great way to play with gouache, which I already like to use, and not think too hard about what it was I was trying to make and just delight myself. So I've always been interested in portraiture and painting, but I also wanted to make comics. So going forward a little in time. This is my graphic novel called Invisible Wounds that came out in 2022. It was nominated for an Eisner, and making this leap from painting into comics, I really wasn't convinced of my abilities as a writer. And I thought, "Ooh, it might be good to just take out that step altogether and talk to other people and have them tell me their stories. And then I won't have to work as hard." It ended up being its own process. It was pre-AI, so I had to transcribe interviews from scratch and go look for veterans to talk to create this book. It was certainly a labor of love, as anyone here who's ever made anything, even dinner, but particularly comics, they take longer than you think they will. So I think this project all told took me around 10 years. I wasn't working the whole time. There was a lot of sort of gentle upheaval and relocating a few times during that decade. But the book did come out. It was nominated for an Eisner. It was really exciting. And I'd put all this work into it, interviewing real people, getting the opportunity to do portraits again. Even the cover here is a portrait, just something I keep returning to. And I was sort of at a loss in 2022 to figure out what I wanted to do in my next graphic novel. Um, so I was making these paintings of Prince. He's a recording artist that I absolutely adore, and it's just another excuse to think about someone I really admire and appreciate, and also think about color and play with that paint. Little tiny 4 by 6 images, and this was also something I was teaching studio classes. So just to show the students very quickly, it's easier to demonstrate something if it's something I'm accustomed to painting more than once. So I have sort of a confidence builder to make these. So just kind of farting around, for lack of a better phrase. But I was trying to figure out how do I get painting and portraiture into comics more. The graphic novel I made was ink on paper and then colored digitally. It was lettered by hand and then sort of adjusted in Photoshop. But I was trying to figure out how to do more gouache and have more fun. And then COVID happened, not a very fun time. I was my now husband, I was dating at the time. He was a nurse at Lenox Hill Hospital in New York City where we lived. And we were sort of grappling with what life in a pandemic in a big city was like. The city had completely emptied out. It was completely surreal. And again, I still had this aversion to writing about personal experience. But I like the idea. He told me that he was getting a lot of questions from different people. He became the medical expert. He's someone's nurse friend. So he's an ICU nurse working in critical care. So they started asking, how's New York City? How is the pandemic? How's nursing? What's it like there? Are they really putting, bodies in freezer trucks and what's going on? So I thought that might be an interesting structure to talk about myself without talking about myself, and to paint a handsome person seems to be recurring theme. So this one I'll read to you. I cleverly tried to include the least amount of words because I didn't want to read too much. So this one, it was originally called Questions to Ask Your ICU Nurse, and it was renamed Life Support. This got published in a literary magazine called Virginia Quarterly Review. I think it came out the year of the pandemic, either 2020 or 2021. We used to ask each other, "Have you seen my glasses? Would you get married in a church or a courthouse? Do you want some coffee?" By mid-March, the questions come to you in bouquets. From your college buddy, "Dude, how was the NYC ICU life?" NYC ICU life, did I say that right? From far-flung RN friends, "A freezer truck?" Question mark. From coworkers via text, "Are you at work tonight?" From coworkers in person, "When is this guy gonna die?" From your parents in Philadelphia, sorry, I'm trying to move the Zoom thing. From your parents in Philadelphia, "How old were your patients?" From the doctor, "Can he breathe without oxygen?" From your patient, "Can I eat on a ventilator?" From me, "Did you eat today?" I don't ask, "Will I ever see you again?" I ask instead, "Is there a show on Netflix?" I can't ask about plans for an ever after. When this is all over, can we? Um, and I think the question I like wanted to ask was like, are we going to be okay? What's going to happen next? I don't know, I think everyone's concerned about the future. I think that's some of the other guests on the call were interested in writing about sci-fi or political uh, sort of, not satire exactly, but a lot of things we're making are forward thinking, what's going to happen next, or how could life look a little bit differently? But it can fill you with anxiety. So we sort of collaborated on this. I got him to help me with the script. He didn't exactly write it, which is unusual. Almost every time I've made a comic, someone did the writing, or I sort of parsed out what they said via interview and translated that into a comic script. But we started working a few years later with the Boston Globe. I had given them some excerpts from my graphic novel with the interviews with veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars that had sort of been serialized with the Globe, just a page here and there. And when it finally came out, the editor at the Globe was very kind, and she hosted the book release event that was in Boston. And she asked me what I was working on. And it wasn't a total lie, but I was like, "Oh, we're making a graphic novel about the hospital." But we hadn't really, we'd just done this little thing and a few other small things for a place called the Nib. And they said, "Oh, you should come into the Boston Globe and work with our editors." And we're very lucky they're with the ideas and opinion section. If you have an idea that's sort of, it can be memoir based, but if it's has an eye towards a current event, they're always looking for comics, and they're absolutely great people to work with. So in one of the art directors or editor offices, it's a small office, maybe like 9 feet by 10 feet, if that, probably smaller. And one wall is completely dry erase board. So it was a little harrowing, but really exciting. I think Camille said they do like live sketching. This is the closest thing I've done to it. So we had all these dry erase markers, and we're trying to figure out how to tell a story on the vertical platform, the vertical scrolling platform. So we originally built this comic series about working in the ICU. My partner Ernesto wrote the comic script, and then I illustrated it. And then the art directors helped us refine the script as we were working, which is a little strange. I think Kristina was talking about when they like to edit. It sort of happens hopefully sooner than later, so you don't have to redraw stuff. But here, I think that the case was also true. We tried to make the script as clean as possible before we got into the visuals. But the challenge was to convert the vertical scrolling comic, once we had it in place, into a print appropriate iteration as well. So I had to read vertically, but also make a brand new version, same content, but read left to right. So in the first comic, these were sort of like guideposts. I was like, these are the scenes I know need to be in here. It's going to be bigger than 10 beats, but I think it ended up being around 40 panels per story, 30 to 40 panels, which wasn't a lot of room, but it was a nice amount of time to get everything in there. Sometimes complicated if there was a lot of dialogue, but here's where the scenes were changing. So I wanted to figure out where my main character was. My husband, he had a ponytail at the time, which was really helpful for situating him with character continuity, and where everyone was and who people were, because at the time everyone was wearing PPE in the hospital. So it seems like I like a man in uniform. I was drawing guys wearing military uniforms, and now I'm drawing a lot of people at the hospital all wearing nursing scrubs and doctor outfits and PPE. So sort of robbed of that joy of doing portraits. But I was trying to find other ways to personify these real people, but also consider the privacy of the patient. A lot of the patients, their attributes or their age or their appearance or even their prognosis might have been changed a little bit just to protect them. And if there were other healthcare workers in the story, like a particular doctor, we just try to change their name. But most of the people that he worked with, it was okay with them if we tried to make them look like how they looked. So if there was an opportunity where there's a photo or something, I tried to make them look like a cartoony version of them. So really the only person I have to answer to is my husband who I live with. So I was like, does this look right? Or when would you have put that mask on that person, the oxygen? Or I could ask technical questions. That was really, really helpful and made the process go a lot smoother. This is a really crazy iteration, a later draft where we had slapped the vertical scrolling version into just like a template of how big the newspaper pages were going to be just to see if it would fit because we had to leave space for this advertisement for Nurses Week and we had to leave space for the title and all these other things. So I was like, if I could fit it in the wrong order, it should probably fit. So this was me panicking. And then it came out really beautifully. It was totally awesome. This was in 2023. The first one was published in May during Nurses Week. We did two that year and we did three the following year. And when we had a sort of bouquet of three in the same calendar year in 2024, the Boston Globe put that package together and sent it to the Pulitzer Board to be considered for the illustrated, I think it's illustrated reporting and commentary is the category. It's often reserved for political cartoons, but we were named a finalist, which was an incredible honor and really delightful. I got to serve as one of the judges this year. So there's not an official comics category with the Pulitzers. There was a graphic memoir that just won the memoir category this past year or the year before last. So it kind of pops up on whatever category it's sort of appropriate for. So in that way, comics is still like pioneering all kinds of like different genres, I guess. It's not cordoned off into one place. And that's really interesting. I won't necessarily read this. I just wanted to show you this is sort of the end of the comic where there's a lot of drama. And again, as I said, everyone's wearing PPE, but there was one particular character who kind of comes in at the end of the scene. They're trying to get a critically ill patient into the elevator at the hospital. Three nurses have this patient, and they're trying to get them into the elevator so they can get them a CT scan on a different floor. And it's a lot hard. They're getting all these cords and sheets and all kinds of things, and they have to make sure that the patient has a sheet over her face for PPE because it's COVID-y in the hospital, but she has this other thing on her face for breathing reasons. So everything's getting sort of more and more complicated. And the patient isn't super stable. And sort of out of nowhere, this priest shows up and gives her a blessing with some holy water and then sort of vanishes again. And I really like this opportunity to draw someone distinctive. He wasn't wearing what the other people in the scene were wearing. And then again, it's like maybe one could argue a man in uniform. I really like this idea of people wearing costumes or outfits or something that's really easy to understand. It's easier to read. It makes it a little harder to make a character more specific, but I think in working with veterans and healthcare workers, it was interesting to see the opportunities
Mm.
when you got someone that was wearing maybe something else. And then this feels like it's a full circle moment coming back to portraiture, just like a nice opportunity to think about a beard or a cool hat or the contrast between the thing he's wearing and the necklace he's wearing. It seems really interesting to me amidst all this technical stuff, like what side would the IV pole be on and how many nurses were in the elevator. It was nice to have this thing that had fewer rules and had like this narrative force. So it was interesting to me. If you're interested in checking out other things about making comics, the thing I can point you to, I'll leave I was trying to think of a link I could share. I'm not really online. In maybe in the spirit of that gritty slide that says "Be uncomfortable." I'm not really on the internet, but I would love for you to check out if you're interested. The Terrible Anvil. It's a podcast that Tom Hart at the Sequential Artist Workshop and I occasionally host, and we talk about different aspects of making comics. And it might encourage you on your journey as you're thinking about making stories with pictures. And there are other links here I can put in the chat. One other thing I do through SAW, the Sequential Artist Workshop, is I host private consultations with people. So for people that might be working outside of comics but are interested in making comics, I specialize in nonfiction, and my degree is in creative writing. So I know a little bit about fiction, but if you're curious about the pacing and structure of a comic, if you've got the script or you're trying to figure out how to translate something into a long form graphic novel or an explainer, there's certainly a place for you at the Sequential Artist Workshop, but I do consults and there are other people that you can do one with. And then the Terrible Anvil is totally free and delightful. And mostly it's Tom and I talking about making comics, but we also, I feel like at the 30-minute mark, we start complaining about capitalism. So, yeah, just when I say be unmarketable, I think just be yourself is, it's a cliche, but it's true. I think sometimes, we want to get our work out there and put it all on the internet as quickly as possible. And I think it's better to quit feeding the algorithm. This is sort of ironic because we're on a Zoom call and I'm like, quit the internet. But yeah, I think you have everything you need and just make the stuff and don't worry about like the trend or it making a lot of sense. I think you just go towards the thing that you love and it will be brilliant.